Senate Commerce Committee, it is time to get started today. Committee, we will stick to our 1 hour time frame. There is a very important event happening at 11:30, so we will need to make sure that we have our work concluded by then so attendees can make it to that event. So this morning, we are going to have a hearing on Senate Bill 511, providing public employees and professional employees certain rights. And we will open the hearing with a briefing from our reviser, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 511 makes changes to law governing deductions of dues from professional employees, teachers, and public employees to professional employees organizations and to public employee organizations, respectively. Current Kansas law provides that professional employees and public employees have the right to join respective organizations. And you can actually find that law in the bill because we're amending those statutes. That's at Section 2, page 2 of the bill, and Section 4, page 4. Current law provides that organization dues may be deducted from the paychecks of professional employees and public employees upon written authorization. For professional employees, that authorization remains in effect until modified or revoked in writing by the respective association or the employee. For public employees, the authorization remains effective for at least 180 days and may be terminated after that time upon 30 days written notice by the employee. The authorization may also be renewed by an employee upon 90 days prior notice. Senate Bill 511 would amend the applicable statutes with new provisions that govern dues deductions, and those provisions are essentially identical with respect to both professional employees and public employees. First, the bill provides that professional or public employees have the right to immediately stop the withholding of dues at any time upon submission of a written or emailed request to their employer. Upon receipt, the employer is to immediately notify the respective employee organization and stop the withholding of dues. No further financial obligation to the organization shall accrue on the part of the employee. The bill provides this right of an employee to immediately resign from and end any financial obligation to the organization is not to be waived. Secondly, the authorization by an employee for withholding of dues is not to exceed 1 year and is subject to annual renewal. Third, the employer must notify their employees of the right to cease payment of dues and to withdraw from the respective organization by at least annually providing written notification in the dues withholding authorization form. This form must be approved with respect to professional employees by the Secretary of Labor, with respect to public employees by the Public Employee Relations Board. And this form must provide a specified notice. You can see that on page 3, section 2 of the bill, and also the same notice on section 4, page 5 of the bill. And I won't read it, but it's laid out there. It basically provides provisions that you're aware you have a First Amendment right. You realize that dues are voluntary, and you waive your right to refrain from union membership and dues payments and authorize the withholding of dues. The form must include the employer's full name, position, respective organization, employee signature, and is submitted to the employer. After receiving this form, the employer must confirm the authorization by emailing the employee at their work email, or if they don't have a work email, some other means of confirming the authorization with them. And then the employer is to wait until receiving confirmation from the employee before starting any deduction of dues. This bill is basically identical to Senate Bill 361 in the 2020 session. That bill, 361, was passed favorably out of the Senate Committee on Commerce, but did not go any further than that. If enacted, this bill would become effective July 1st, 2022. The other amendments in the bill are all basically just to conform with the amendments in sections 2 and 4. So sections 2 and 4 are really the primary changes that the bill is making.
Committee questions for the reviser. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if you're the one to answer it. If not, well, I'll wait for a conferee. But Kansas being a right-to-work state, why do we need this legislation?
So yeah, that probably is more of a policy question. I mean, you are correct that it is a right-to-work state, and I think, you know, the proponents and the opponents are going to have arguments both ways on that.
Seeing no other questions, we will start with proponent testimony. Committee, first up, we have F. Vincent Vernuccio. I hope I said that name correctly. Labor Policy Senior Fellow with the Workers for Opportunity on WebEx. Vincent, are you with us?
I am, and it is Vernuccio. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify here today. My name is Vincent Vernuccio, and I am a Senior Policy Fellow with Workers for Opportunity, a project of the Mackinac Center. We stand in full support of this legislation, SB 511. And before getting into it, I just want to address the previous question of why a right-to-work state would need these good bookkeeping practices and protecting public employees throughout the state. So we have numerous examples, both in Kansas and around the country, of teachers and other public employees actually being trapped into paying union dues. This is regardless of right to work, and this is regardless of the Supreme Court case, Janus versus AFSCME, that brought right to work to non-right to work states such as California and Illinois. So the reason that this bill is needed is to strengthen those right to work protections, because even though unions in Kansas can't get workers fired for not paying them, that's what right to work means, they can still trap them into paying union dues for 6 months or a year. We've actually seen examples of this. And I know that the Kansas AAE affiliate in their testimony provided examples, and I'm sure they'll probably be able to get into more details. While previous versions of this bill have been heard, evidence has been provided of these dues checkoff forms that can trap public employees into paying. Now, thankfully, some of these have changed since the original version of this bill was introduced, but there is still nothing in Kansas law preventing them from changing back, and there's still nothing in Kansas law of preventing unions from trapping public employees into paying them. Further, a lot of public employees do not know they have the rights under right to work, under the Janus decision to not pay. That's why the disclaimer and the language of this bill is so important. And in addition to telling them about their rights, giving them the ability to leave and stop paying at any time, which strengthens the right to work law, it also gives them an annual opportunity to make that decision. So a union card should not be an heirloom, just like you re-opt in for health insurance or other benefits during open enrollment. The same should be true for your union dues. So we fully support the bill, but I would suggest a couple small changes, lessons that have been learned where this bill has been passed elsewhere. For instance, in the right to work state of Indiana, a similar piece of legislation was passed last year, and the union sued. The judge said that for the vast majority of the legislation was good law, and it has gone into effect, except the judge did say that affidavit saying, "I'm aware I have a First Amendment right," was compelled speech. Indiana actually just passed an amendment to their bill. Instead of saying, I have a First Amendment right, the affidavit is now a disclaimer that says the state wishes to make you aware that you have a First Amendment right. So in my testimony, I have that language, and I would suggest that that be substituted in the bill to make sure that the bill is as strong as possible and there is no opportunity for lawsuit on compelled speech grounds. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions, and thank you again for hearing this bill and giving me the opportunity to speak remotely.
Thank you, Vincent. If you're able, we will hold questions until all proponents have had a chance to testify.
Thank you.
So with that, committee will go to Gary Seigel, Kansas Association of American Educators. Welcome to the committee, Gary.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Gary Seigel. I am the Executive Director of the Kansas Association of American Educators. I'm providing this information today to testify in support of Senate Bill 511. In addition to my 10 years as Executive Director, my perspective includes 33 years of teaching and coaching experience at a Kansas public school. The Kansas Association of American Educators is a non-union teacher organization. It is a professional association that provides benefits and services to educators such as liability insurance, professional development opportunities, and advocacy on a host of educational issues. ks is not a union and does not bargain contracts for teachers. We believe teachers should be allowed to join a professional employee organization at any time of the year, and we believe they should be allowed to leave that employee organization at any time of the year. Polling shows that 85% of teachers agree with this position, as they want freedom to do as they see fit. ks policy mirrors what we are advocating for. Educators can join our professional association at any time of the year, and we allow them to close their membership at any time. The problem is many teachers aren't allowed to do that in other professional employee organizations. In one district, a union member must resign between August 1st and August 31st. In another, it is prior to August 10th. The challenge is for these union members wanting to end their membership to find the applicable dates for their district. And should they fail to meet the deadline in their district, they are then left to pay hundreds of dollars in membership dues they don't want to pay as they wait for the next opt-out period. When I first became the executive director, I met a teacher who was a member of the union but wanted to join our association. She checked with her local, was assured she could stop her membership, then join ks, paying the entire membership cost. At the end of September, she noticed on her pay stub that union dues were still being drawn out. She checked back with her local and was told she had requested to leave too late and therefore couldn't end her membership until the end of the school year. She wrote me an email asking if we'd allow her to stop her membership, as she didn't need membership in both associations. Being new to my position, I checked with my national executive director. He told me emphatically to give her her money back. I'll never forget it. As a new employee of ks, it told me our philosophy was this teacher was more important than her money. I have had other educators come to me frustrated that they want to leave the union but have been unable. ks is an example of a professional association that is able to respect the wishes of our members by allowing them to end their membership at any time. We should respect our outstanding educators here in Kansas and make it easier for them to know their options and easier for them to exercise their right. Senate Bill 511 will do just that. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Gary. Next, we have Dave Traubert, CEO, Kansas Policy Institute. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave Traubert, Kansas Policy Institute. It's our pleasure to be here in support of Senate Bill 511. As you've heard, there are some constitutional issues resulting from the Janus decision in the U.S. Supreme Court, which now makes one statute arguably unconstitutional. State law in Kansas requires that a dues withholding authorization be in place for at least 180 days. Constitutional rights cannot be subject to a clock, a calendar. They're absolute. So that needs to be changed. There's also the issue you just heard of the teachers union. The NEA application for membership specifies that August 1 to August 31 window. It does not allow teachers to leave whenever they wish. And I would also point out that I know from previous years, there has been reference made to, well, you have a gym membership, you can't get out of that contract, why should you be able to get out of this contract? We're talking about constitutional rights here, not gym memberships, not cable bills. There are no constitutional issues associated with those. This is a constitutional matter, and we should stand for the employee's right to exercise their right and not be constrained. And with that, Madam Chair, I will be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Our final proponent is Elizabeth Patton with State Director, Americans for Prosperity. I do not see Elizabeth at this time. If she does happen to join us during proponents, we will come back to her. Committee, we do have written only proponent testimony from Eric Stafford, Vice President of Government Affairs, Kansas Chamber. And with that, we will open up questions for the proponents. Senator Dole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak with Vincent, please, first. Is he still on?
Yes.
Vincent, are you just reading your testimony and such, I take it you're from Indiana, correct?
No, the Mackinac Center is based in Michigan, and I live in Virginia.
Okay, so your office is actually in Michigan at this time?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make this clear. I was a teacher for some time, and I never belonged to KNEA. I never belonged to a union, and I never, ever felt pressured by anyone. And I wasn't a very good coach, so I was in a lot of different schools. So I never got pressured. Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is also for, I'm just going to say Vincent, if that's okay.
Vincent's just fine, thank you.
So you say that the unions in Indiana were sued, or the union sued in Indiana. What court action have we had here in Kansas?
I believe because the bill has not been passed, there has been no court action in Kansas, and the recommended changes hope to keep it that way if the bill passes.
So we don't have any problems with this in Kansas, is what you're saying?
I would leave that up to Dave Traubert at Kansas Policy or the KNEA or KNAAE.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Vincent, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm a Hoosier. I don't know if that matters to Dahl or whatever, but that probably explains some things, don't it? Okay. So, Vincent, good morning. Who's the attorney in your group of four here? Would that be most likely you, since you're talking about First Amendment stuff?
I am, and I do want to stress that, aside from the First Amendment, this bill is about good bookkeeping. It's about protecting both right to work and the Janus rights of public employees.
No, Vincent, here's my question, buddy. So here's the deal. You're talking about a concern about trampling First Amendment rights. I'm concerned about trampling property rights. And specifically, Vincent, what I see here is that if you have a union member come on board, KNEA, and I assume this is just targeted KNEA, basically, the property rights issue I see is that if they have joined and pay some dues up front, and the KNEA has turned around and invested in some things or programming for that member, what I guess what I'm seeing in this bill is you're saying that a member of that KNEA union could basically arbitrarily in time say, hey, I'm out, you guys stink, I want my money back. And now you basically have where the KNEA has gone forward and made some expenditures on that disgruntled member's behalf. And now KNEA is stuck financially holding the bag trying to unwind that. Walk me through what you see as why that isn't a property rights infringement on KNEA.
Well, it's a First Amendment it's a First Amendment issue for the teachers. So the way this would work is that first the teachers would be made aware of their rights. And that was the language we were just talking about knowing that both it's a First Amendment right and also that Kansas, being a right to work state, that they have the ability to not pay. And this would come up annually as noted in the bill. What you're talking about there is the ability to leave at any time. And I do not believe that for a lot of public employees, it is that lump sum. It is more of a subscription basis, or they are paying out of every paycheck or every other paycheck, depending on how the dues withdrawal is structured. What this bill will do is it simply says that you are not locked in for up to a year. That First Amendment rights cannot be put on pause, that your rights under Kansas's Right to Work Act cannot be put on pause for up to a year, that you should be able to exercise those rights at any time, leave the union at any time, and frankly, you should also have the right to join the union at any time. And that's what this bill, one of the hearts of this bill gets at.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll close with this. I would strongly push back on that. To me, your bill, if enacted, would trample the property rights of the union in the agreement in between the union and the member. And by the way, right to work doesn't mean worker friendly, just so you understand that. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Senator Dahl.
Thank you. This is for Dave. Dave, I pulled up the Janus versus the AFSCME, and I agree with you. It says that you can't be forced to pay union dues and everything. And I didn't read the whole decision, but it doesn't say what I'm looking at, the summary of it, that if someone joined the union, that they could pull out at any time. You know, and I think one person said that, you know, he had from August 1st to 31st. Is that in that decision that you can pull out at any time and not?
Senator, I believe what you're really asking here amounts to a legal question, and I'm just a recovering accountant, so I really couldn't. Now, from what I understand, though, the way that it's been explained by attorneys and other places is that when you say you cannot be forced, then if you want out today and you can't get out, then you are being forced to pay dues against your will.
And I respect what you're saying there, but to tag on to Senator Holland, you know, you're writing a budget up for a year and it gives you an opt-out. It would seem difficult that if people pulled out anytime they wanted to. I got all the benefits and then they got the raise for me, and then all of a sudden I said, I don't want to belong to this union anymore, and then I don't have to pay the dues. You know, I can be okay with this. What I'm not okay with is pulling out at any time. That's what I have difficulty with. So anyway, thank you for your.
If I could comment on that, though, I would respectfully disagree that a union has property rights. When we're talking about rights, we're talking about constitutional issues. And an individual, I understand, you raised it, and so I'm going to walk through that door. The individual has a constitutional right. The organization does not. And so even if there was, unfortunately, they expended some money, I seriously doubt they expended money specifically on that person. I would contend that, having run a lot of organizations, that you're spending money based on what the organization needs, and whether you have one or more or less customer doesn't really change anything. But regardless, they don't have a constitutional right attached with their budget.
Senator Dahl. Yeah, Senator Dahl.
I'm not going to get in this with you here, but I'd love to talk to you about it in the hallway sometime. Sure. It just, and I think the point I'm making that we're not getting is that they do have a right to get out. They have 30 days to get out. But in the constitutional aspect of them paying, when you sign a contract, there's certain things that go with that. And when you join the KNE, now I never belonged to it, so I don't know, but I think you sign a contract.
But you do not, you could say that you signed a contract, but you cannot waive your constitutional right in a contract. And that They do not surrender that. They should be able to get to exercise their constitutional right. It's the individual's right that supersedes any interests of the company or the union, the organization.
And
Quickly,
Senator, if I may, that was one of the other issues within the Indiana court case, where you're correct. The judge said you could not impinge on current contracts, except the contracts for mostly the teachers' unions in Indiana actually expired within a few weeks of the bill going into effect. So the bill was enjoined until those contracts expired. If you look at my testimony, there is a recommendation to have similar language in this bill to say that it will not affect on any current contracts, but that it will go into effect on future contracts if contracts are renewed or extended or modified, which would address any contracts clause or property rights issue that you're talking about.
thank you. A quick follow-up, and then Senator Tyson has a question. I'll phrase it this way. Do only teachers who belong to the union reap the benefit of a negotiated raise, or do non-union members get that raise as well?
Typically, I mean, I would have to look at, I haven't looked at every single case, but from what we understand in typical case, whatever is negotiated between the district and the union is applied to everyone.
That's been my experience. I don't know of a district that has negotiations for union teachers versus non-union. There's one pay scale that I'm familiar with, but just wanted to double check that. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One of my concerns has been that the dues are collected using taxpayer money. I don't care that anybody joins any union, but is that still correct, that taxpayer dollars, it comes out of their payroll and we're using taxpayer dollars to?
It can.
Yes. So, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Seeing no other questions, committee, we will move on to, we have no neutral. We will move on to opponent. And first up, we have Mike Kane, Commissioner, District 5, the Unified Government of Wyandotte County. Is Mike here? Okay, we will move on, and maybe Mike will join us. Emma Cleveland, Amalgamated Transit Union, and I believe she's joining us via WebEx.
Hi, good morning, everyone. How are you? Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Amalgamated Transit Union. We are the largest labor organization representing transit workers in the United States and Canada. We represent more than 180,000 members across 49 states, including workers in Topeka, Kansas City, Lawrence, and Johnson County, Kansas. The ATU strongly opposes Senate Bill 511, and we have substantial concerns about the bill. This ill-conceived legislation would have unintended consequences, including preventing the flow of millions of dollars in federal infrastructure funds to the state. SB 511 would render the public transit systems in Kansas ineligible for Federal Transit Administration grants, which are conditioned on the continuation of certain collective bargaining rights. For now, public employees in Kansas, like those at the Topeka Metropolitan Transit Authority, have the right to bargain freely over the terms of their collective bargaining agreement. Employees at the TMTA have exercised this right to bargain, including over dues deductions. But because this bill severely restricts what a dues deduction clause in a collective bargaining agreement can say, it would also immediately jeopardize TMTA from receiving federal transit funding. Kansas would be ineligible for a projected $20 million in federal transit funds over the next 5 years from the bipartisan infrastructure law alone. So in order for a public transit agency to receive federal transit funding, the Department of Labor must certify that arrangements are in place for the continuation of collective bargaining rights for the employees. So if Kansas state law stripped transit employees of their right to bargain over mandatory subjects of bargaining, like dues deductions, the U.S. Department of Labor would be unable to make a certification, and it would jeopardize Kansas Transit Authority's ability to receive transit funding. So Issues could arise if the bill was put into effect, an employee turned in the form that's specified in the CBA, TMTA could no longer honor it because it does not include, for instance, the statement about First Amendment rights, and the employer has not received the second confirmation called for in the bill. So in order to follow Kansas state law, the transit agency would have to violate the CBA, which both the union and the agency have agreed to follow, and in turn, the Department of Labor would be unable to certify that the transit authority has preserved the rights, privileges, and benefits under the CBA, and therefore the DOL could not allow federal transit funding to flow to the state of Kansas. So often, transit employees are exempted from restrictions on collective bargaining in order to ensure that transit funding can continue. For example, in Arkansas, transit employees were exempt from a bill prohibiting public sector bargaining entirely. In Wisconsin, transit employees were exempt from a bill restricting public sector bargaining. And in West Virginia, we expect that the governor will sign a recently passed bill exempting public transit employees from a prohibition on dues deduction. The director of the DOL Office of Labor Management Standards noted this in a letter to the Florida government, who are considering a similar bill. And he noted that in the past, some states have enacted changes to public sector collective bargaining to ensure the smooth, uninterrupted continuation of federal transit funding by exempting transit employees and their unions from these changes. So we appreciate the opportunity to bring this testimony about the impact of SB 511 on the state of Kansas and its transit systems, and we urge you not to pass this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma, and hopefully you'll be able to stay around for questions after all opponent testimony.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much.
Committee, next we have Jake Miller, Executive Director, Working Kansas Alliance. Welcome, Jake.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I will note, I believe Mike Kane was going to be written only, so I think that's why he wasn't on that.
Thank you.
A lot of members here on this committee are new in recent years, and I state that because we have heard this bill every year for the last 4 years. So to everyone behind me, this is kind of a song and dance we run through every year. I will tell you, I want to touch on a couple points. I've provided written testimony that adds some, but I want to highlight some points that were made by proponents to just clear the air a little bit. So Mr. Traubert talks about how in the application on a dues deduction for the KNEA, you are obligated to be there for a year. That is what it, I haven't seen it, so I can't say that is what it says, but I'll take his word for it, that's what it says. I will tell you that's modeled after private sector law, which is the NLRB has came down with what's referred to as Beck notices, which means you have to give people a way out at some point. So that language is pretty typical used by every union across the country. Now, the reason I'll tell you that doesn't matter in this instance is if it mattered and someone wanted to break their union membership in Kansas today and their union didn't allow them, I guarantee you that the proponents of this bill would pay for their attorneys to sue the union. And as Senator Ware asked the question to Mr. Venuccio, there are no cases in Kansas of this. For 4 years, we've been getting told that this is an issue in Kansas, this is an issue in Kansas, yet we haven't seen one court case that proves it's an issue in Kansas. From my knowledge, and the Working Kansas Alliance is not technically its own labor organization, but I do practice union side labor law on my other portion of my life. And I am not aware of a single union who doesn't let someone out when they ask for it. Because why would you keep someone in that you don't want to? He mentioned the state law provision on 180 days. That's not something set forth by unions. That's something set forth by the legislature. And the purpose for that is not for the benefit of the union, it's the benefit of the state and the local governments. Because you don't want someone who's going to join on June 1st and then go to their HR department on June 10th and say, I don't want to do this anymore. So that's not, I mean, quite frankly, the only thing, there's no year period, it's only a 6-month period. To respond to Senator Tyson's question on the taxpayer funds, I think that that's somewhat of an attack on these workers in a way. And I tell you that because this isn't taxpayer dollars that go to the union in a due, right? This is money earned by a worker of a government that is, yes, paid by state dollars. But if that's the case, everyone on this side of the room, I could sit here and say, well, where do you donate your money? Well, where do you donate your money? That's taxpayer dollars. I mean, in essence, that question is saying that these workers don't earn that money. I mean, this money is earned, it's deducted out of their gross wages. It's their wages. It's not the state or the local government sending X number of dollars to a union to fund it. No, these are wages. Just like if you tithe to your church, this is the choice that they make within their paycheck. I will touch on a piece that always comes up in this. The proponents have talked all day long about the KNEA and teachers. The bill doesn't just impact KNEA and teachers. If this bill is passed, as you have seen in written opponent testimony, this goes after firefighters, it goes after cops, corrections officers, linemen, snowplow drivers, and everyone else. This isn't just tailored to teachers. So they find it easy to attack KNEA all day long, but that's not the case. You're attacking every single person in this room. And I will say, I don't believe it was submitted as testimony, but I have it and I will provide it to anyone. I know the city of Topeka provided testimony, but I have a paper that we had HB 2354 looked at by the Unified Government of Wyandotte County. 2354 is the identical bill on the House side of this. They talk about how there's substantial cost to local governments on this. I mean, in essence, which I think is a little funny in a way, the proponents are asking for a tax increase on either constituents or spending increase by government, which is kind of opposite of what they usually testify on. Because what this bill does is it requires public employers to send an email every single year and ask someone on an email, did you mean to sign your authorization card? Did you intend to sign your authorization card? And if they don't get that email back, then that person doesn't get to be deemed a union member. Well, the unified government said they have 13 bargaining units within their county. They said they'd have to hire a specific person to do this bill. Where are those funds coming from? I don't know. I mean, to me, this is an unfunded mandate. Something else I would like to talk about is not only the cost of increased spending to the local governments, but I'm going to bring up cost of increased funding to the states. Mr. Venuccio spoke on various courts talking about these bills across the country. If you pass this bill, the unions are going to make a lot of money. And the reason I tell you that is, here's a headline from West Virginia. Judge stops West Virginia bill preventing union payroll deductions for public employees. And win for Indiana Teachers Union. This is the case that Mr. Venuccio was talking about. And win for Indiana Teachers Unions, federal judge temporarily blocks new state law. In Alaska, there was a case that awarded unions $200,000. Actually, I think it might have been more than that, but I don't have that press release here with me. But in their opinion, speaking on this Janus piece particularly, the legislation that was passed in Alaska was very similar to this one put forth by the policy institutes. In their opinion, they state ASEA, which is the Alaska State Employees Association, is entitled to a declaratory judgment that the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution does not require the state to alter union dues deduction practices in place prior to August 27, 2019, which is when we look at most of the Janus decision coming through. But here's my favorite one. A right-to-work state, Janus did nothing to right-to-work states. Okay, so to answer Senator Dahl's question, it really didn't. Essentially, Kansas abided by the Janus decision in 1953 when we had a right to work to the state constitution. Because all Janus said is public employees have the right to work, have the right to join, right? They have that ability. Well, we were already doing that. In a union security clause within a private sector agreement or in a non-right to work state, it means when you join an employer, you're automatically a member of the union. In right-to-work states, that's not the case. That's not true. So if it's a right-to-work state, you have the option to join. You don't get it, you're not forced by any means, which is what the proponents are telling you happens. But back to my testimony pieces, Iowa, which is a right-to-work state, Iowa must pay union $2 million in dues deduction case. Similar legislation here. So the reason I raise these points are, this is not anything that is required by the Janus decision. It's not. Can you do this? Yeah, you can. Nothing says the legislature can't. But I'm not going to sit here like the proponents are and lie to you that we must comply with this, because there's nothing that says that. If you do this, though, I just wanted to paint the full picture, because many of these other cases have been looked at here. I just want to paint the picture of what could happen. So that is all I have, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I will remind you, in all conferees, we will not accuse any conferee of lying or misrepresenting. We will keep decorum in this committee hearing. With that, questions for the opponent. Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Miller. Is it, I'm trying to understand a little bit better, but if somebody is a union member, they're able to deduct that membership right out of their paycheck and not pay taxes
No.
on the, well,
So
pre-tax?
I mean, I'm honestly not 100% sure on the setup of it. Now, union dues are not tax deductible. So I believe it can come out of the gross wages, but they're not tax deductibles once you file your tax return at the end of the year.
Right, but it can come out pre-tax, kind of like a.
I'm honestly
HSA
not
account.
positive on that question. I'd have to go back and check. It is
We
not
have a
pre-tax. It is not pre-tax. It is post-tax.
It's not, okay. Any other follow-up, Senator O'Shea?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm just trying to understand the comparison with if you're donating to a church or to another nonprofit and how you can eventually deduct that. But I know you have to make a certain amount of money to be able to deduct those donations. And so I just was hearing some comparisons and trying to understand.
Well, and I'll tell you, the reason I made that comparison was the point of the question that said, these are taxpayer dollars going to pay unions. My point on that is these are earned wages going to pay unions. They're not, the state doesn't say, okay, we have X number of union members at X number of dollars a month and we have to go pay that. No, that's not how that works. What happens is an employee receives their paycheck, but it just like anything else, if you want to have it automatically gone to your 401k, you want to have it automatic, that's how that works, is my point.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you. That does clear it up. Somehow I was thinking it was maybe pre-tax or something like that. So thank you.
Other questions for opponents? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 511. I do want to draw the committee's attention, though, to the written-only opponent testimony. We have 8 listed there, so please look at those. And seeing no other business, committee, we are adjourned.